intended.com, and I just wanted to do another video. It's been about a couple years since I posted my original video, and the first one I put up on the channel had to do with basically it had to do with what we were sort of looking to do and what we had done. So that particular video happened to be about some of the things that we have done in our past to homestead or live holistically or those types of things, basically being sustainable. We're really looking to do that, and we're in just started April pretty much of the year 2020. So a little bit more of a background for those looking at the videos going, what is this person talking about as far as, you know, they moving around in the different states and what is it looking like? So basically the other small bit of background I wanted to mention was we lived in Florida. I lived there my whole life, born and raised. Met my husband there. We got married in like 2007. So that was the start of our marriage. And that's basically what had happened with the background as far as the last video. I had talked about, you know, things that we had grown, having hens and getting fresh eggs, making our yogurt and our bread and cooking from scratch and things like that. Preserving your food and you know, those kinds of ways of living naturally and holistically. And it did start mainly more to do with us having children and what that was going to look like for us. So the blog itself started from birthing naturally, which basically for us particularly meant being at home and birthing at least our first 3 in the water. We didn't use any kind of medicine for that. We didn't have epidurals. We had none of that. We were able to do that naturally, supernaturally. So I was very stoked about that. That's where a lot of the blog itself kind of originated and thought it was to be a resource for women and people looking to do that. And I wanted to expand at the time, not just doing about pregnancy and birth naturally and having babies, but what it meant to use essential oils and herbs medicinally rather than using Western medicine. So that's kind of the background for that. Since we had lived there in Florida, we ended up moving in 2017. In June, and we ended up in Maryland for my husband's job. And this meant we decided to rent. We weren't going to just jump into buying a home there. And so because of that, we ended up renting. And thankfully we did that. And it turned out that that was not exactly the state for us to be in. We were not, it just didn't feel like home. So, and there's a lot of other reasons I'm not going to get into, but basically we just decided, you know what, this is not our home state. We don't want to be here. And so he was able to do something different. He stayed with the same company he was with, and we were able to go to a different state. So we're now currently in Missouri. We've been here just now. The end of April this month will be a year. So we've been renting for 3 years. So that previous video that I posted, I made it in 2018 and I posted it in 2019, which was the last year according to this timeline now. And we were renting for that time frame, and that's why I said in that particular video we didn't have any chickens or anything because we had nowhere to put them. We were renting. Now we're renting again, but this time around I definitely think that I have fallen in love with the state. This is a beautiful state. We did a lot more research this time around, so we actually had not done as much research to go to Maryland. We did some, but not that much. And then when we got there and realized that this was not the place for us, we made sure we did a lot of research. And we also prayed a lot to try to find out where we felt like God was leading us. And he led us here to Missouri. Wasn't on our original radar. We were thinking one of the Carolinas, possibly Georgia, somewhere along those lines. Kind of that nice little nugget of states right there between like Pennsylvania and Florida. Well, that's kind of where we figured we were going to end up. Did not expect the Midwest like at all. Wasn't really on the radar. But it turns out that this is a very welcoming state as far as a lot of the things that we wanted to do. Very good for homeschooling. It's particularly good with a lot of the home birthing and things like that if that ever comes up again. But the other big one had to do with the homesteading. We had been looking all over Maryland. It's a great place to homestead, but it was just really hard on a lot of different things. And the cost of living just kind of exceeded where we really felt comfortable with being. So Missouri turned out to be a much better option. Cost of living is much further down, and we were able to get here and be here for a year now. And because we did feel like this is home for us, this is going to be our home state, we started looking around. So it turns out there's a whole slew of things that go along with that. But the main thing that I wanted to say was the next video was supposed to be about the dreams and goals that we had for being sustainable and what we were looking for coming out of Florida. Basically, it's been 3 years now, and we've talked a lot. I would say to anyone who is interested in homesteading, it doesn't have to be the large scale where you're having 40 acres of property and you've got, 5 pigs and 10 horses, and then you've got, sheep and goats and cows, and you don't have to have all of those things to be considered homesteading. The last video, I basically said Wikipedia is not talking about those things. You can have those things, and that definitely counts for homesteading, especially if you're not doing like a farm situation where you're making that your living. Homesteading is about being able to live sustainably so you're not having to spend as much money on your food and the things that you're using for yourself. That's basically the gist of it. So you could be doing what we were doing in Florida, even without chickens and vegetable gardens and fruit trees, making your own yogurt, baking your own bread, and cooking from scratch, and that's still considered homesteading. So it's not necessarily that. But I will say that it has gotten to a point in our dreams and our discussions. The other thing that I would say is make sure that your spouse or your partner, whoever you're with, is going to be, your family as a whole is going to be on board with what you're doing. It is very hard to do it alone. Sadly, for our situation, there was a lot of times where my husband was doing the bulk of the work. He was going to work and he was coming home and he was doing a lot of the garden and a lot of the chickens. And I did my very best at the time, but I was going through a lot of stuff kind of personally, emotionally, and it was just having a really hard time for me to get outside and doing the things that I wanted to do to help him. So my goal coming into this new season of our life is it's going to be the job that we have. We've gotten to a place where we've sort of leveled out with homeschooling itself. We've homeschooled now for about 5 years, maybe 6. I think we kind of started with Miranda fairly young. She was about 3 or 4 at the time. And through all of that, it basically showed I got to an equilibrium. So a lot of what I'm doing with the younger children, I have already done. So it is not as hard in the sense that I have no idea what I'm doing. Basically, it's, more pauses. So basically, it's more to do with the fact that Miranda's coming into new territory. So every grade she comes up in, I have to sort of explore it a little bit more and try to get a feeling for what I'm doing and what she needs to know going on and moving forward. And I love the whole homeschool mentality. When you talk to homeschoolers, a lot of the time they're like, ish is the grade. So we could say that Miranda is in 4th-ish grade. Sophia, on the other hand, is like a whole conglomerate of strange, like she's just turned 6. So she'll be 6.5 come like June or so. She's like far surpassed kindergarten because she's been doing it along with her older brother and sister for most of her life. So she's somewhere sort of in like 1st grade-ish, somewhere between there and 2nd grade in a lot of the different areas and subjects, except for this particular fact of her like handwriting skills. That's she's still working on that, and that's pretty normal for her age. But a lot of the other things, she's picking up math really fast. She's kind of beyond, and that's the great thing about homeschooling, especially when there's older siblings that they're basically tagging along with and learning from. So that's kind of been all settled out, and we've been dreaming and researching the homesteading aspect of our lives. And I feel like if we can balance our schedule and our routines well, we can make all of these plans that we're trying to have work. So basically, it's been a 3-year conversation with my husband because a lot of the time I would say, I think we should do, like the best example that I have is probably the pig. Because I said to him probably, I don't know, a year after we were in Maryland and I was doing all these researches and looking at, homesteading and what that meant and what that looked like and how beneficial having pigs are. I mean, not just for the fact that you end up with pork and bacon and all of those things. So yes, you're going to end up with that, whether you're butchering it yourself, having someone butcher it for you, or just basically selling that to someone else and letting them, because it's very lucrative right now. And so I said to him, we should get a pig for our homestead. That's what we should do. When we finally get our homestead, when it goes down, we need to have a pig. I really think that we should have a pig. And he's like, no. We don't need a pig. I laugh now because, and that's just one example. Now he's like, we should have like 2 pigs. We should have a pig for ourselves, and then we should have another one to sell, and, you know, all of these things. And that way, you know, he's fully getting on board with a lot of the things I'm talking about. And one of the big things that I will say that's changed from the 3 years of planning it and having this 3-year discussion was, got to a point where I really wanted to do my own dairy animal. And I went back and forth between like goat and cow for a really long time. They both have amazing benefits. The research, a lot of it comes down to which animal you're going to prefer and or which milk you're going to prefer. So there's just a lot at play in that. But I really started out strong with, I want a dairy animal. And the other thing you have to remember is there's a lot of romanticized thoughts when it comes to having a homestead. Oh yeah, I'm going to have this cow, and it's going to be this wonderful, amazing creature. And I'm going to, you know, make sure that she has a baby so we can have milk, and we just be in our milk. And that baby, you know, we can sell that baby when it grows up. Whether, you know, if it's a girl, obviously that's going to be some good income. And if it's a boy, hey, we have, you know, the idea of having enough property so we can butcher ourselves a cattle, basically. So there's like a lot of this going on in my mind. And doing a lot of more research later, I realized, and watching Homesteady is a great YouTube channel. You should really check it out. Homesteady. They've got a great setup with their YouTube videos. They have a cow, and they have, like, now they have like a number of animals. But when I was watching at the time, it was right before and after they had moved from one state to another with their homestead. And they had a cow, and they talked a lot about a lot of different things that involve having a cow. And I had done research about what does it mean to have a cow. It's not going to be all fun and roses. Milking in general is just hard, and you have to get used to it. And I don't know if we're ready for that. But veterinarian bills, making sure you have enough space for these animals, there is a lot involved. And I was just thinking about, you know, I think there's a part, oh, there's a cardinal. Squirrel. I'm getting distracted. Sorry. There's a lot to be thought of when you're wanting to do something, and I didn't want to jump in full swing when we get a homestead regardless. So one of the things that I had originally wanted was a dairy cow. And then I decided to let that particular dream go, thinking that I could find someone and connect with someone in this network of homesteading and find maybe this resource and barter for it or straight up buy it if we really need to. So it's changed. It's evolved a lot. The original dream involved having a cow, and it does not now. But here's what I will say it involves, just so it's going to be all documented and everything. We want a property that is going to give us the ability to have livestock, not just poultry, not just the chickens and the ducks, which are obviously kind of a given because we totally want those, but the ability to have something else that's going to bring us some kind of meat resource. So we've gone back and forth with it. And at this point in time, the livestock that we want to have is probably going to be some sheep and probably going to be pigs. Now, my husband has sort of latched onto this idea that he really wants to propagate the sheep. So basically, he's talking about having two ladies, 2 ewes, and he's talking about having a ram and basically breeding them and letting them birth babies and then have that happen in the springtime. So we basically have our spring lambs, and then we take them all the way through fall and slaughter them to eat. And with the possibility of also getting sheep milk, although, you know, there's a lot of a leeway with that. I'll just put it that way, because I know that we won't straight up drink that like we would cow milk or goat milk. So I'm not really sure. I know we could probably use it for something like making cheese or some other things. So there's that as well, which we would definitely want to take advantage of any kind of benefit that we would get from having a sheep that's in milk. So he's really latched onto that. I'm not really so sure, just because of the fact that I'm not completely certain that we would be able to handle seeing the birth of some animal that is amazingly cute and wonderful and then butchering it to eat it. So we're going to have to see how that goes. But he's kind of thinking that's what he wants to do to start with. The other livestock is pigs. He's definitely said that he's agreeing that we should have at least a couple pigs, one to eat, one to sell. And I think that's very wise. We've talked about propagating those also, but I think that we're leaning away from that because they're even a little bit less time than having sheep. So basically you get them in the spring, you butcher them in the fall. You don't have to worry about overwintering these animals. Sheep, on the other hand, he's talking about doing that with. So those are the livestock. The other meat animal that we are considering are rabbits. I'm not sure if those will happen or not. Not completely clear. But there's also the sense that we want to do meat chickens to go along with our egg-laying hens. And we've talked a lot about it. We want to plan it right. We're definitely not opposed to the fact of doing the Cornish crosses or whatever particular breeds that are specifically, that are for meat, that have a very high turnover as far as the time that it takes for them to grow, like 6 to 8 weeks, I think maybe 10 at the most. But we're also saying that we want to populate our egg-laying hens with the dual breeds that have the purpose of going right from being an egg layer in a couple years when they're not laying like they ought to, or I say ought to, but they're not as fertile as they were because they're only fertile for really a couple years. And then taking those and butchering them to make those meat hens as well. So there's a lot of thought that we've been trying to put into this. The only other thing I will say as far as like an animal type thing would be bees. We want to do some honeybees on the property, basically to sort of take advantage of the fact that we would be getting our garden definitely pollinated. Absolute must for us. We want to make sure that it's going to go right, which also brings up the other thing that I'll talk about in a minute, which we want to do is the garden. But the bees, we need to do a lot of research more into that. We've done some research, but we really need to, we're not going to do all of this full swing. So we're going to do some sheep, some pigs. We want to do bees and poultry. So basically ducks and chickens. We definitely want to do some fruit trees and some fruit bushes to get that sustainability coming back every year. The list of trees is phenomenally off the charts. There's at least 10 different ones we want to do just to start with. Basic list, of course, apples, pears, plums, peaches. We'd like to do some cherry, mulberry, elderberry. It's quite a large list. As far as the garden itself is concerned, we obviously want to do some medicinal herb gardens and also culinary herb gardens, which are kind of one and the same. You can use a lot of culinary for medicinal purposes. But other than that, we also want to do a very large, like 1,800 square foot garden for our vegetable and fruit meaning like melons and things like that when I say the fruit part. But mainly we want to make sure that we have a garden that is going to grow enough food for us for a year, take the time in the summertime through fall, and slowly but surely get it all preserved, canning and drying and all those types of things. So the goal is to be sustainable. That's really the goal. And a lot of that's going to be, as far as vegetables, peas and beans, and we love broccoli. We're definitely going to do squash. It's a very large list, and I can do a specific video on just that, and I probably will. So basically that's kind of the gist of it. We want to make sure that we are starting slow and taking our time so that we're not wasting our resources or being so over ambitious that we lose some of the things that we're trying to do. So if this video doesn't seem to work out for whatever reason, I might make another just to make sure that we're getting the right one. And I just don't want to leave anything out because it's exciting. And these are the things that we're wanting to do. And it looks at the moment like that might be a little bit closer than further off. So just wanted to share what we're looking to do. So this has been Melissa Clark with thewaygodintended.com. That's the blog. I'm looking to do some more updates on that particular resource as well. And we're looking to go a little bit further and expand, and more to come. So until then, y'all, it's been good sharing with you, and we'll talk to you next time.